Please don't leave us, too." The little girl's voice cracked as she reached for the stranger's coat, her tiny fingers gripping cold fabric like it was the last solid thing in her world. Behind her, her twin sister stood frozen, a tear sliding down her cheek, teddy bear dangling from one hand. Their mother had just vanished into the crowd, swallowed by the chaos of Grand Central Station. And the man in the tailored suit. He was about to walk away until that voice stopped him cold. What he did next, no one saw coming. If your heart skipped a beat, leave a comment. Let us know, would you have stopped? It was just another Monday morning in Manhattan, and Marcus Whitman was already 3 hours into his day. A billionaire real estate mogul with a reputation for ruthless precision, Marcus thrived in control of markets, meetings, and emotions. He didn't believe in detours, not in business, and certainly not in life. On his way to a high-stakes board meeting, Marcus asked his driver to take a detour through Grand Central Terminal to avoid traffic on Park Avenue. He had no intention of stopping. The terminal, with its towering windows and swirling tides of people, was merely a transition point. But as he exited toward Lexington, a quiet disruption froze him mid-stride. A young woman sat hunched on the granite steps of a city-run shelter, her arms wrapped tightly around 2 little girls' twins. They were no more than 6, dressed in matching lavender jackets, their faces partially hidden beneath knitted hats and tear-streaked cheeks. One clutched a faded teddy bear, the other a lunchbox missing its handle. Their mother trembled, visibly distressed, rocking them gently. Then, with a shaky breath, she stood, whispered something in their ears, placed a folded letter in one girl's coat pocket, and disappeared into the morning crowd. Marcus watched instinctively, stepping aside as she passed him. She didn't look back. The twins remained frozen in place, their backs straight, as if pretending not to notice the abandonment their eyes had just witnessed. One of them turned toward him. "Please, don't leave us too." It wasn't a cry, nor a demand. It was a whisper, small, worn, and devastating. Marcus blinked. Something about that voice pulled at him from a part of his memory he had long sealed off. A memory of standing alone outside a tenant court in Chicago, the night his mother handed him a duffel bag and told him to be brave. He could have kept walking. He should have. Instead, he crouched down, meeting them eye to eye. One of the twins held out the letter like it was her last piece of proof the world might still be kind. She said someone nice would come. She said softly, "Are you nice?" He didn't respond. He took the letter. The handwriting was shaky, hurried. "I can't do this anymore. I have no family, no job, no home. I'm sick, there's something wrong, and the doctors won't treat me without insurance. I didn't want them to watch me get worse. I'm sorry. Their names are Emma and Ellie. Please help them. I'm trusting someone out there to do what I couldn't." There was no signature, just the names. Marcus folded the letter slowly. The noise of the city seemed to vanish. All that remained was the sound of Emma and Ellie's breath, shallow and quiet. A city worker glanced over but didn't approach. Commuters streamed past, eyes forward, detached. "I'm not trouble," Ellie said suddenly, as if reading his hesitation. "We just need somewhere warm for a little while." For a long second, Marcus said nothing. This wasn't part of the plan. He had no room in his life for unexpected children. His days were measured in profit margins, not bedtime stories. But he couldn't walk away. "Come on," he said. The girls rose without hesitation. In the car, Marcus gave no explanation. His driver raised an eyebrow in the mirror but said nothing. The ride uptown was silent. The girls sat pressed together, watching the city blur past. When they arrived at his penthouse, the doorman barely concealed his surprise. Marcus, the most private man in the building, bringing home 2 small girls. Upstairs, the girls tiptoed into his expansive living room, staring at the floor-to-ceiling windows, the glass sculptures, the velvet couches that looked too expensive to touch. Marcus motioned for them to sit. They did, a stiff, quiet, unsure. "You hungry?" he asked. They nodded. He ordered pancakes, fruit, hot chocolate. While waiting, he read the letter again. Every sentence hung heavier than the last. What kind of world pushes a mother to abandon her children not out of apathy but out of hopeless love? The food arrived. They ate carefully as if rationing comfort. Marcus stood nearby, arms crossed, completely unsure of his role in this moment. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. "Just tonight." They didn't argue. They didn't ask where their mother was. They just nodded, exhausted. In the guest room, they climbed into bed side by side, Ellie still holding her teddy bear Emma, whispering something only her sister could hear. Later, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed staring out at the skyline. His phone buzzed with reminders, conference calls, investor updates, dinner with clients. He didn't touch it. Instead, his mind returned to that voice. "Please, don't leave us too." That night, sleep didn't come easily, and when it finally did, it brought a dream he hadn't had in years, standing alone on a winter sidewalk waiting for someone to come back. No one ever did, until now. Marcus Whitman sat at the edge of his marble kitchen island, the letter unfolded again beside his untouched coffee. The silence of the morning was unlike anything he was used to. Normally, it buzzed with Bloomberg updates, phone calls, schedules ticking down to the second. But today, the only sound was the muffled footsteps of two little girls exploring a stranger's home like it might vanish any minute. The note kept pulling his eyes back. He must have read it 10 times already, and still every word struck deeper than the last. "I'm trusting the world one last time." That line, that desperation. It felt familiar, too familiar. He'd been that child once, not with lavender jackets or matching ribbons, but with a plastic bag and a cracked calculator in his backpack, left in the care of a neighbor who barely remembered his name. His mother hadn't abandoned him. She just didn't know what else to do. Footsteps padded closer. Emma peeked her head into the kitchen. "Can we color?" she asked, as if asking for permission to exist. Marcus nodded. He pulled open a drawer where he stored luxury pens and unopened notebooks meant for boardrooms, and handed her a silver pen and a leather-bound journal. She beamed like he'd given her a treasure. Minutes later, Ellie joined her sister, and the two of them sat on the living room rug, drawing stars and stick figures, whispering between themselves. They weren't scared anymore. Not exactly, but they still looked like they were waiting for the world to remember them. Marcus watched them, something shifting inside him, something quiet and ancient. They weren't asking him for anything. They weren't crying. They weren't loud or chaotic. They were just surviving. He picked up the letter again, and this time flipped it over. On the back, faint pencil marks listed a name, and Hospital Isabel St. Anne's Clinic, Albany. Albany, nearly 3 hours away. Not a city he had any reason to visit, and yet here it was staring at him like a choice. His phone buzzed. His assistant, Ava. "Morning, Marcus. Just confirming your meeting at 10 with the advisory board and lunch with the Crownworth Group. Also, legal asked about your Q3 sign-off." He typed back a single line, "Cancel everything until further notice." The reply came quickly. Everything he didn't respond. Instead, he called his driver. By noon, Marcus was in a black SUV headed north, the letter folded neatly in his coat pocket. Emma and Ellie had stayed behind with a private nanny he trusted from one of his partner's families. They didn't cry when he left. They didn't ask where he was going. But Emma handed him her drawing before he walked out. It was of a woman with a sad face in a hospital bed. Next to her were 2 girls, and above them a tall man with a briefcase in one hand and a heart in the other. He wasn't sure what that meant, but he took the drawing anyway. St. Anne's was a humble facility, a rural health center tucked between frozen fields and gray skies, the kind of place people went when they had nowhere else left. Inside, the hallways smelled like antiseptic and old paper. A nurse looked up as Marcus entered, her eyes narrowing at his tailored coat and city shoes. "I'm looking for a patient. Isabel, no last name, brought in sometime this week." The nurse hesitated, then pulled up the record. "Isabel Moreno. Brought in 4 days ago. Collapsed at a bus station. Severe pneumonia, malnourished. She's under observation, but she's not well. Can I see her?" The nurse studied him again, then nodded slowly. Room 204 was quiet. Machines beeped steadily. Isabel lay small and motionless beneath pale sheets, her lips a dry hair clinging to her forehead. Her face was drawn too thin, too tired, but it was her, the woman from the shelter, the woman who trusted the world one last time. Marcus stood by the door, unsure of what he felt. Pity, no. Something deeper. A strange cocktail of anger at the world, guilt at its design, and a surprising sense of duty. She stirred slightly, eyes opened, unfocused. "Emma," she whispered. "No," he said softly. I'm a friend. The girls are safe." Tears welled instantly. Her chest trembled with a gasp, but she didn't speak. She didn't have to. Everything she felt was in her eyes: relief, regret, disbelief. Marcus pulled a chair beside the bed. "They're with me, in my home. They're okay. We're figuring things out." "Why?" she asked, her voice cracking. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat and pulled out Emma's drawing. He laid it on the bed beside her hand. "I'm still figuring that out too," he said. For a moment, they sat in silence. "I thought if I left them there," Isabel said faintly, "someone would see them. Someone would stop. But I didn't really believe it. People don't stop anymore. They did this time." She closed her eyes. A single tear slid down her cheek. Outside the room, Marcus leaned against the wall, the weight of what he had just witnessed heavier than any deal he'd ever signed. Isabel wasn't reckless. She wasn't unstable. She was broken in all the quiet ways the world doesn't know how to fix. Back in the car, heading home, he looked out at the road winding past winter trees and frozen ponds. For the first time in years, his thoughts weren't about numbers, acquisitions, or market shares. They were about crayons, about whispered pleas, about choices. When he returned to the penthouse that evening, Emma and Ellie were asleep on the couch, a blanket tucked around them. A children's movie still played silently on the screen. Marcus stood for a long moment watching them breathe. That letter hadn't just changed their lives, it was changing his. The story broke 2 days after Marcus returned from Albany. It started as a blurry photo, Marcus stepping out of his SUV carrying Emma in one arm, while Ellie held tight to his coat. The image was picked up by a local blogger who captioned it, "Is this NYC's coldest billionaire showing a heart?" Within hours, it was everywhere. National outlets, morning shows, social media flooded with hashtags. Billionaire with a heart, who are the twins Marcus Whitman rescues? Inside his penthouse, Marcus watched it unfold with unease. He hadn't planned any of it, no press releases, no photo ops. He had never craved attention, but the world had turned a private moment into a public spectacle. His assistant Ava called, her voice sharper than usual. "Marcus PR is having a meltdown. Half the board wants you to clarify your involvement. Investors are asking if this is a new brand strategy. It's not." He replied flat. "Then what is it?" He didn't answer. That afternoon, his legal team scheduled an emergency call. Corporate liability, personal exposure, custody questions, they danced around the subject with lawyerly precision, all while avoiding the one thing he cared about: the girls. By evening, Marcus sat in a conference room on the 38th floor of Whitman Holdings, surrounded by people in suits more concerned with perception than truth. One board member leaned forward. "Marcus, if you want to play philanthropist, we can structure a narrative that doesn't tank shareholder confidence. But this looks reckless. People are speculating about your mental state. I'm not playing anything," he said. Another executive jumped in, feigning concern. "You've always kept your personal life private. This shift feels abrupt, uncalculated. That's not like you." Marcus looked around the room. For years, these faces had been his compass. Now, they just looked like noise. "I didn't do this for a headline," he said. "I did it because no one else did." He left before the meeting ended. That night, Emma asked why people were talking about them on TV. "Did we do something wrong?" she whispered. "No," he said, kneeling beside her. "They just don't understand yet." The next morning, Marcus took the girls to a nearby park. It was cold, the trees bare, but Emma and Ellie chased pigeons like it was summer. A few people stopped to stare. One woman asked for a selfie. A man in a suit muttered something about publicity stunts. Marcus said nothing. He just watched the girls truly laugh for the first time since he met them. It made the noise fall away. Later that week, he returned to Albany. Isabel was awake now, still weak but coherent. Her first question wasn't about her health, but about the twins. "They're safe," Marcus told her. "They're more than safe." Isabel cried silently, her hands trembling against the hospital sheets. "I thought I lost them. I thought I didn't deserve another chance. No one should have to choose between dying alone and leaving their children behind," he said quietly. "I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to," Marcus replied. "Just get better." Back in the city, the media frenzy only intensified. Talk shows debated his motives. Tabloids speculated about adoption. Someone even tracked down a former nanny of Marcus's who claimed he was incapable of emotional attachment. But amid the noise, something unexpected happened. Letters began arriving, hundreds, then thousands. Handwritten notes, emails, drawings from children. Single mothers thanking him. Fathers saying they cried watching the news. Strangers sharing stories of abandonment, of being seen, of wishing someone had stopped for them. He read every single one. Then one day Marcus received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a photo, a girl maybe 5, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Please don't leave us too." On the back was a note. "This was me once. Thank you for not walking past them." Marcus sat at his desk for a long time, the photo in his hand, the words echoing. That evening he called Ava. "Draft a proposal," he said. "We're creating a foundation." For what? For families who fall between the cracks. For children who wait on steps. For people no one sees until it's too late. The Whitman Foundation was born 2 weeks later. No press event. Just a quiet launch. The mission was simple: emergency grants for mothers in crisis transitional housing for families, pro bono legal aid, and a national hotline for child abandonment risks. Isabel was moved to a rehabilitation facility closer to the city. The twins visited her twice a week. Each visit grew longer, more joyful. Ellie brought her drawings. Emma brought jokes. Marcus came too, but always quietly staying in the background unless Isabel asked him to sit beside her. One evening, as the sun dipped over the Hudson, Isabel looked at him and said, "You didn't just help them. You helped me remember I was still their mother." "You never stopped being," Marcus replied. That night he stood alone in his study, looking out at the skyline he once thought meant everything. Now it felt small. Beautiful, but incomplete. The heartbeat of his world had shifted. and it wasn't coming from the boardroom anymore. The house in Cape Cod hadn't been used in years. Marcus had bought it back when success was still a novelty, an escape plan he never used. A place with no cell signal in some rooms, with windows that opened to salt air and wild grass. Now, it seemed like exactly what they all needed. He arrived with Emma and Ellie late on a Friday afternoon. The drive had been long but filled with singing snack breaks and the kind of questions only 6-year-olds could ask. Marcus had forgotten how curious silence could be when it was broken by wonder. The front door creaked open. The air smelled faintly of ocean and time. Dust particles danced in the late sun filtering through linen curtains. Ellie ran from room to room, counting windows, while Emma called dibs on the one with a view of the sea. That first night, Marcus made them pasta from a recipe he found online. He burned the garlic and undercooked the noodles, but the girls called it fancy and asked for seconds. After dinner, they built a pillow fort in the living room and watched an old animated movie until their eyes fluttered shut, one twin curled against his shoulder, the other asleep mid-giggle. Days took on a rhythm Marcus hadn't expected. Mornings began with blueberry pancakes better each time, and then long walks along the shoreline. The girls collected shells and gave them names. Marcus, once a man of graphs and forecasts, now found himself rating seashell beauty and skipping rocks. Afternoons were spent painting on the back porch with dollar store watercolors, the girls making portraits of each other, of Isabel and of him, always with a big smile, though they had never seen him wear one quite that wide. Isabel arrived on the 5th day. She was thinner, moving slowly, but her eyes were brighter. She wore a scarf around her head and carried a bag that looked too light for the journey it had traveled. When she stepped out of the car, the girls ran toward her, shouting her name with the kind of joy that broke something open in the air. They held on to her, as if afraid she might fade again. Marcus watched from the porch, unsure if he belonged in the moment. But Isabel looked up at him and nodded soft and certain, and he stepped down toward them. They didn't talk about the hospital or the weeks apart or the headlines. Instead, they talked about the fort the girls had built and how many pancakes Marcus had burned before learning to flip them without breaking. Over the next few days, they became something not quite a family, but not strangers either. Isabel cooked dinner while the girls read out loud. She told stories about her childhood in Mexico, about a grandmother who once cured a fever with mango leaves and honey. Marcus listened often, silent, but never distant. One night, Isabel found him on the porch, staring at the waves. "You're not who I thought you'd be," she said. "Neither are you," he replied. She smiled. "You were supposed to be the man who saved my kids." "I didn't save anyone," he said. "They just wouldn't let me walk away." That's the same thing. Their conversation drifted into quiet. The kind of quiet that holds meaning, not awkwardness. One afternoon, the girls filmed a video on Marcus's old tablet. They wore matching dresses with flowers in their hair and introduced themselves like anchors on a news show. "Hi, I'm Emma," one said. "And I'm Ellie," said the other. "And we want to say thank you to everyone who helped our mommy." They talked about pancakes painting and their favorite memory when Marcus made them hot cocoa and added way too many marshmallows. When the video went online, it was meant only for family and friends. But within days it was shared across platforms. Viewers were struck not just by the sweetness of the girls, but by the quiet presence of Marcus in the background, cleaning up spilled cocoa and laughing as Emma smeared paint on his shirt. People didn't just see a billionaire anymore. They saw a man changed, rooted present. A week later, the Whitman Foundation received its largest single-day donation since its launch. They extended their services to more cities, partnering with shelters and hospitals. Marcus made sure Isabel had everything she needed: medical care, legal guidance, a secure place to live when she was ready. One evening, Isabel joined Marcus in the kitchen, watching him stir sauce with a seriousness he usually reserved for mergers. "I'm scared," she admitted. Of what? Of going back? Of having to do it alone again? "You're not alone," he said without hesitation. The words hung there. Neither of them moved. She nodded. "I know, but it still feels like if I blink this will disappear." "It won't," he said. "Not anymore." The next day they went into town for the first time. Emma and Ellie picked out seashell necklaces. Marcus bought them each a disposable camera and told them to capture their favorite memories. That night, the girls asked if they could sleep on the porch under the stars. They made a bed from sleeping bags and cushions, and as Marcus tucked them in, Emma asked a question. "Are you going to be our forever person?" He looked at her, then at Ellie, who waited with wide eyes. "I'm going to be whatever you need me to be," he said. And for the first time in a long time he meant every word, without conditions, without contracts, without escape routes. The stars stretched wide above them. Something broken had not just been rebuilt, it had been transformed. The launch event wasn't hosted in a ballroom or at the top of some skyline tower. It was held in a converted community gymnasium on the Lower East Side walls, painted by children's streamers made from recycled art paper and folding chairs arranged in gentle rows. There was no red carpet, no velvet rope, just people volunteers, mothers, social workers, nurses, and a few guests who had once believed they were forgotten by the world. The Whitman Foundation's first public fundraiser began with no fanfare. But when Marcus stepped onto the modest wooden stage, every conversation fell silent. He wore no suit, just a pressed shirt and sleeves rolled to his forearms. His speech wasn't written on a teleprompter. It was folded in his hand, a little wrinkled from the ride over. "I never planned to be here," he began. "For most of my life I measured success by buildings numbers expansion. I thought I understood what it meant to build something important. But I was wrong." He paused, looking across the room at Isabel sitting in the front row with Emma and Ellie flanking her, their legs swinging in unison off the edge of their chairs. "About 3 months ago, I met 2 girls on the steps of a shelter. They didn't ask me for money. They didn't ask me for anything, actually. They just looked up and hoped someone might stop." He glanced down at the paper in his hand, then folded it and tucked it into his pocket. "What they gave me wasn't a burden. It was a purpose. And today this foundation isn't about charity. It's about acknowledging the invisible, the ones we walk past, the ones too tired to cry for help. This place, what we build together, isn't about rescuing. It's about seeing." Applause came softly at first, then grew stronger, rooted in the kind of resonance that didn't need polish to be profound. Afterward, Isabel joined Marcus outside for a breath of air. She held a paper cup of lemonade, her fingers wrapped tightly around it. "I kept waiting for the moment you'd hand us off to someone else," she said. "I did too," Marcus replied. "But the truth is, I didn't want to let go." A quiet laugh escaped her lips. "You've changed." He looked up at the string lights swaying in the breeze, then back at her. "No, I think I just finally remembered who I was supposed to be." The following weeks were filled with a different kind of work. Not the type Marcus had known: contracts, margins, endless acquisitions, but real work. Listening, planning school transitions, meeting with psychologists about trauma-informed care, sitting through community board meetings where chairs creaked and ideas clashed, but progress happened one voice at a time. The girls began school in late spring. On their first day, Marcus insisted on walking them to the front gate. They wore new backpack shoes that squeaked with every step and smiles stitched with nervous excitement. Ellie turned before stepping inside. "You'll be here after I'm not going anywhere," Marcus said. They disappeared through the gate hand in hand, their pigtails bouncing with every step. Back at home, the silence was strange. Not unwelcome, but filled with the echo of change. Isabel had taken up part-time work at a local nonprofit counseling women in transition. She said it helped her remember that her story wasn't an ending, it was a beginning she never expected. In the evenings, they gathered on the roof garden Marcus had forgotten he even owned. Emma and Ellie planted sunflowers. Isabel brought tea. Marcus read books aloud, sometimes stumbling over the silly voices they demanded he use. One night, as the city hummed around them, Isabel said quietly, "I'm going to move into my own place soon." Marcus nodded. "I know. I want the girls to have stability, a place that's ours. They already have that," he said, "in you." She hesitated. "And you?" Marcus exhaled. "They have me too, just in a different way." The arrangement wasn't formal. There were no drawn-out court proceedings, but eventually Marcus became their guardian in everything that mattered. He picked them up from school, attended every recital, taught them how to ride bikes in Central Park. Emma once told her teacher that Marcus wasn't her dad, but he was her forever person. The foundation expanded slowly, deliberately. Marcus refused to let it become just another tax shelter or PR stunt. Every new city required vetting. Every new partner had to prove they understood that helping wasn't the same as saving. They started Hope Hubs in 4 neighborhoods across the country, places that looked like community centers but functioned as lifelines. They offered meals, legal aid, therapy, job training, and most importantly, a place where people could speak and be heard. Marcus visited each one. Not for photo ops, just to listen. In Detroit, a teenage girl told him she had considered sleeping in a library bathroom until a Hope Hub staff member found her. In Phoenix, a mother of 3 said the foundation gave her the first hot meal she'd had in 2 days. He carried their words home with him like compass points. One evening, as summer neared its end, Marcus took the girls to the beach house in Cape Cod. It looked much the same, weathered, but loved the sea stretching endlessly before them. Emma ran ahead shrieking with joy. Ellie chased behind her, laugh echoing through the breeze. Isabel watched from the porch. Her hair had grown back. Her face was fuller, stronger. Marcus stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that day?" she asked. "Every day, and I don't regret it, not 1 second." The girls came back carrying driftwood and shells, chattering about a sand castle plan that would require buckets, water, and Marcus's help. He knelt in the sand, his designer jeans forgotten, and began building with them. Tower by tower, moat by moat. They crowned him chief engineer of Fort Shellington, and for once he didn't correct them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the beach in gold and lavender, Marcus looked at the family he never expected, the life he hadn't planned, and the girls who reminded him every day what it meant to stay. And somewhere deep in his chest a promise echoed, not the kind made in boardrooms or brokered in silence, but the kind made in heartbeats. Unshakable, quiet, forever. Marcus Whitman never imagined that the course of his life would be altered by 2 small voices in the chaos of Grand Central Station. Yet here he was, years later, looking out over the ocean from a quiet bench in Cape Cod, reflecting on a journey that began with heartbreak and ended with something more lasting than wealth-love. That morning, when Emma reached for his coat and whispered, "Please don't leave us too," Marcus didn't know then that she was also reaching for his soul. The vulnerability in her eyes shattered a wall he had spent decades building. A man who had built empires with logic and led with caution now found himself moved by a child's raw need. He hadn't planned to stay, he hadn't planned to care, but he did. The story that unfolded wasn't one of simple charity, it was one of transformation. Marcus didn't just intervene in the lives of 2 abandoned children and their struggling mother. He opened his life to them, and in doing so allowed his heart to be broken, mended, and ultimately reshaped. There was the letter, of course, the one Isabel had written before making the impossible choice to leave her children at the shelter. That note, wrinkled and stained, spoke volumes in just a few lines. It wasn't abandonment, it was trust. A mother believing someone somewhere would see the goodness in her daughters and protect what she couldn't at that moment. When Marcus found Isabel at the rehabilitation center, it wasn't confrontation that unfolded, it was understanding. And it was then that Marcus learned true courage wasn't found in boardrooms or battlefields, but in hospital rooms, whispered apologies, and determined mothers reclaiming their worth. Cape Cod became their safe haven, a place where Emma and Ellie rediscovered childhood, where Isabel rediscovered herself, and where Marcus, the man who had always calculated ROI and controlled outcomes, learned to surrender to the unpredictable rhythm of family. They weren't perfect. There were nights filled with tears, misunderstandings, and the slow unlearning of fear. But there was also laughter. There were birthday cakes made from pancake batter beach picnics that ended in sand-covered naps, and stories told under blankets during summer storms. It didn't take long before temporary became forever. Marcus founded the Whitman Foundation not as a public gesture but as a deeply personal mission. He saw firsthand how the system failed families like Isabel's, those who were doing their best but still falling through the cracks. His foundation focused not just on aid but on dignity, not just on rescuing but on restoring. The foundation grew rapidly not because of flashy campaigns, but because of its quiet effectiveness. It became a lifeline to hundreds of women like Isabel, brave, overlooked, and determined. And to children like Emma and Ellie, resilient, imaginative, and deserving of more than just survival. Isabel didn't fade into the background. She became a voice, a counselor, a founder. Ellie's light. Her transitional home for single mothers was more than just a shelter, it was a symbol. A symbol that redemption isn't a fairy tale, it's a choice made over and over again in small defiant acts of self-belief. Marcus remained at the helm of his company, but with new boundaries. Meetings no longer consumed him. He took calls between school drop-offs and helped with science projects. He wasn't always perfect. He once showed up to a PTA meeting still wearing mismatched socks from pancake duty, but he was present. That mattered more. Emma grew up into a writer capturing their story, not for fame, but for the hope it could offer others. Ellie, thoughtful and empathetic, pursued psychology, driven to help children navigate the very emotions she once had no words for. They still called Marcus their forever person. And every year on the anniversary of that fateful day, they returned to Grand Central, not to mourn, but to honor. They lit candles for the people who stopped, for the moments that mattered, for the small miracles born of human connection. Their story became more than a headline. It became a legacy. So, what can we as viewers and listeners carry with us? First, that the smallest actions often have the deepest impact. A pause, a question, a willingness to listen. That's where change begins. Second, that love isn't always dramatic. It isn't always fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it's sitting beside someone who is afraid. It's choosing not to leave. It's being present again and again. Third, that we all have more power than we think. You don't need billions. You don't need status. You just need heart. Courage, the willingness to inconvenience yourself for the sake of someone else's peace. Marcus didn't just change the lives of 3 people, he built a movement. Not with speeches, but with presence. Not with strategy, but with sincerity. And if you're wondering whether these moments still matter, look around. The world is full of Emmas and Ellies and Isabels, some waiting for a second chance, some waiting to be seen. So here's the truth, you can be someone's turning point. If this story moved you even in the smallest way, take that feeling with you. Be the kind of person who stays, who asks, who notices. Be someone's forever person. And if you want to support stories like this real, human hopeful, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice helps us create more content that doesn't just tell stories, but helps heal hearts. Thank you for being here, and thank you for choosing to care.